That motel, even now years later, the memory of its silence, thick and cloying as the desert dust, still crawls under my skin. A phantom itch I can't scratch. I was just a long-haul trucker, Carter Monroe, trying to outrun a freak New Mexico electrical storm that was chasing my rig like a hound from hell. And Dry Hollow seemed like a mirage, a forgotten pimple on the raw, sun-blasted edge of nowhere, offering a $30 room for the night. The girl at the desk, Lorna, with eyes that never seemed to blink and held the stillness of a desert noon, handed me a tarnished key to room 5 and a small, neatly folded piece of paper with 3 rules, handwritten in a precise, almost unnervingly elegant script. No explanation offered, just a quiet, almost sorrowful intensity in her gaze that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I nearly laughed, thinking it was some weird desert kitsch to spook the tourists, a way to justify the peeling paint and the buzzing neon sign that only half lit the word motel against the bruised twilight sky. Until the first knock came at precisely 3 a.m. Exactly 4 distinct, deliberate raps on my door, and the loudmouth guy in room 2, the one who'd loudly scoffed at Lorna's list of Looney Tunes rules in the parking lot, never checked out the next morning. My 18-wheeler had been wrestling with crosswinds for the better part of an hour, the sky ahead a churning cauldron of black and violent purple. The main highway was a parking lot, thanks to a jackknifed semi. My GPS, usually a reliable voice in the wilderness, was spitting static and suggesting routes that looked like goat tracks. That's when I saw the sign, faded and leaning precariously. Dry Hollow. Pop. 73. The 73 was crossed out with a single, angry red line. Below it, smaller, almost an afterthought, motel, vacancy, desperation, and the promise of a few hours of horizontal unconsciousness before the storm broke proper made the decision for me. Anything to escape the sleepless ghosts that rode shotgun with me on every long haul. The ones that whispered of twisting metal and a life I'd shattered. The town of Dry Hollow itself was little more than a collection of skeletal buildings, swallowed by dust and time, their windows like vacant eyes, staring out at the endless expanse. The motel, set back from what might have once been a main street, was a low, U-shaped stucco building. 5 rooms visible on my side, their doors painted a faded, sun-bleached turquoise. The air was heavy, still, thick with the scent of creosote, dry earth, and something else, a faint, almost imperceptible metallic tang, like old, rusted pipes. The neon sign above the equally dilapidated office sputtered, casting a sickly pinkish-orange glow that did little to dispel the encroaching gloom. Lorna Kao was behind the counter, a slim figure in a simple, slightly old-fashioned dress. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, emphasizing wide, unnervingly calm eyes that seemed to absorb the dim light without reflecting it. She looked to be in her mid-20s, but there was an ageless quality to her stillness, a profound quietude that felt ancient. The lobby was a time capsule. Dust lay thick on the threadbare armchairs, and a mounted jackalope head, whose one remaining glass eye stared at me with vacant accusation. The only thing truly clean was the Formica countertop, and the old, Bakelite rotary phone, beside a dog-eared guest register. From a concealed speaker, a radio played, the music barely audible through a wash of static, a mournful country ballad, sung by a voice that sounded like it was broadcasting from the bottom of a well. Room for the night? Her voice was soft, melodic, almost a whisper, yet it carried perfectly in the oppressive silence. Yeah, just one. I was too tired for small talk. She pushed the register towards me. No credit card machine in sight. $30. Cash. As I signed Carter Monroe and my right plate number, she retrieved a key from a hookboard. Room 5. Beside it, she placed the folded piece of paper. The rules of the house, she said, her gaze unwavering. It wasn't a request or a suggestion. It was a statement of fact, delivered with that same quiet, sorrowful intensity. I picked it up, unfolded it. 3 rules to stay alive. Don't drink the tap water after sunset. It comes from a different source at night. If you hear knocking at 3 a.m., count the knocks. If it's more than 3, don't answer. When you hear coyotes howling in perfect harmony, stay inside until the singing stops. I stared at it, then at her. A flicker of something passed behind her eyes. Not amusement. More like resignation. Or pity. Some local color, I asked, trying for a light tone that fell flat in the heavy air. Dry Hollow has its ways, Mr. Monroe, she replied, her voice still a soft lullaby. It's best to respect them. My room was at the end of the U, clean, surprisingly, but stark. A saggy double bed, a scarred dresser, and a small buzzing refrigerator. The mirror above the sink was old, its silvering slightly flawed, yet it reflected the room with an unnerving, almost hyper-realistic clarity, as if it were perpetually high noon within its depths. Regardless of the dim light in the actual room, the tap water, when I experimentally ran it, came out with a faint rusty smell and a brownish tinge, even before sunset. I made a mental note to stick to the bottled water I had in my truck. Next to my room, room 6 was different. Its door wasn't turquoise. It was raw, weathered wood, no number on it, and it looked to be bricked up from the inside, judging by the uneven lines of old crumbling mortar visible around its edges. Yet, as I stood there, a faint, almost inaudible sound reached me from within, a rhythmic drip, drip. Impossible. As I was hauling my duffel bag from the truck, I saw the occupant of room 2, a burly, red-faced man in a greasy trucker cap, arguing with Lorna near the ice machine, which looked like it hadn't worked since the Eisenhower administration. His voice was loud, dismissive. Some damn list of Looney Tunes rules. Lady, I just need a bed, not a ghost story. He snatched his key and stomped towards his room, muttering. I watched him go, a small, cold knot of unease tightening in my chest. Lorna didn't react, just stood there, a slim, still silhouette against the dying light, her gaze fixed on room 2. The desert wind picked up, carrying the scent of distant rain, and that faint, unsettling metallic tang, stronger now, as if the very earth around Dry Hollow was exhaling something ancient and unwell. The sun bled across the vast New Mexico horizon, a spectacular, violent smear of bruised purples and molten oranges, before finally surrendering to the night. True to the forecast, the distant storm was building, flashes of lightning illuminating the underbellies of the clouds like exposed nerves. Inside room 5, the single bare bulb in the ceiling fixture cast a harsh, unwelcome glare. I'd long since given up on finding any TV channels that weren't pure static, and my phone remained a useless brick. No bars, no signal, nothing. Exhaustion was a lead weight on my eyelids, but sleep, as usual, was a skittish creature. My mind kept replaying the rules, Lorna's unnervingly calm demeanor, the bricked-up room 6, with its phantom dripping. I thought of the sleep medication in my bag, the little blue pills that rarely offered more than a few hours of drugged, dream-filled oblivion. I needed water, despite Lorna's warning. A part of me, the stubborn, road-weary trucker part, still rebelled against the idea that tap water could magically change its properties with the sunset. I turned the faucet in the small porcelain sink. The water that sputtered out was different now, visibly different. It had a dark, almost oily sheen to it, and the faint metallic tang from earlier was now a pronounced coppery reek, like old blood mixed with damp, disturbed earth. A small, iridescent bubble rose from the stream and popped, releasing a faint, swampy odor. I remembered the first rule. Don't drink the tap water after sunset. It comes from a different source at night, with a shudder of genuine revulsion that overrode my skepticism. I watched it gurgle down the drain. The sound it made wasn't normal, more like a thick, viscous liquid being reluctantly swallowed, ending with a soft, choked sigh from the pipes. Restlessness gnawed at me. I started to pace the small room, the worn linoleum cool beneath my socked feet. My gaze fell on the cheap nightstand beside the bed. One of its drawers was slightly askew. Idly, I pulled it open. Stuck at the very back, wedged beneath a faded Gideon Bible, whose pages were fused together by damp and time, was a small, spiral-bound notebook. Its cover was stained and warped. The ink of the handwritten title, Dry Hollow Maint, Loke, R. Murdoch. Faded, but legible. Ray Murdoch. The name felt vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place why. I opened it. The entries, penned in a cramped, spidery hand, began mundanely enough. Notes about leaky faucets, a faulty ice machine, complaints about the buzzing neon. But as the dates progressed, the tone shifted, growing more agitated, more fearful. Oct 12, 81. Water in room 3, acting up again. Smells like a damn swamp after dark. Old Man Hemlock, the previous owner presumably, says it's just the aquifer, that it's always been this way. Don't believe him. Something ain't right with the wells out here. Knock 5, 81. Heard the knocking again. Room 6, always room 6. 3 taps, then 1 more, told Hemlock. He just stared at me with those dead fish eyes of his, said to leave it be. Jananatine, 82. The calls. Started hearing calls from inside 6, like someone's whispering my name from the pipes. And the faces, sometimes when the water runs dark, I see faces in the plumbing. Just for a second. Told the wife I'm seeing things. She thinks I'm drinking again. The entries grew more erratic, the handwriting more frantic. The final one, dated February 3rd, 1983. The year Dry Hollow was supposedly abandoned, was barely legible. A desperate scrawl across the page. Saw him in the mirror. Me, but not me. Drowned. From the flash flood back in 72. The one I shoulda. He was smiling. Water in the tub was black. It's not a reflection. It's a... The entry ended there. A long, spidery smear of ink trailing off the page. A cold dread washed over me. Ray Murdoch. He hadn't just been a maintenance man. He'd been a witness, or a victim. I needed air, badly. The oppressive atmosphere of the room, now charged with Murdoch's terrified words, was suffocating. I stepped outside. The desert night was unnaturally still. The air cool, but carrying that same faint metallic tang, now laced with something else. A cloying, perfumed sweetness, like night-blooming jasmine, but somehow burnt wrong. Under the flickering motel sign, leaning against a battered pickup truck I hadn't noticed before, was another figure. A man, perhaps in his late 40s, weary-looking, with tired eyes and a rumpled shirt. He looked up as I approached. "We're a night for traveling," he said, his voice raspy. "Name's Asher. Asher Vale. Geologist. Just passing through. Stuck like you, I imagine." He gestured vaguely at the churning distant storm clouds. "Carter Monroe," I said, relieved to see another normal-seeming human. "Yeah, storm's a bad one." Vale nodded, but his gaze was distant, troubled. "This whole area, Dry Hollow, it's geologically unique." He seemed to choose his words carefully. "The aquifer beneath us is incredibly deep, incredibly old, and volatile, especially after dusk." He looked directly at me then, his eyes intense, almost feverish. "The water table shifts dramatically when the barometric pressure drops. It draws from different strata. changes the mineral composition, and sometimes it brings other things up with it. He paused, his gaze flickering, his form seeming to shimmer almost imperceptibly at the edges of my vision in the dim, pulsating neon light. Best to stick to bottled water after sunset, Mr. Monroe, for your own peace of mind. Before I could question him further about his cryptic pronouncements, or the way he seemed to almost fade in and out of focus, he gave a curt nod. Well, try to get some rest. He turned and walked towards one of the darker, unoccupied rooms at the far end of the motel, disappearing into shadows that seemed deeper than they should be. Lorna, who I now saw standing motionless in the doorway of the motel office, her face a pale oval in the darkness, gave no sign that she'd seen or heard him. I returned to my room deeply unsettled. Valley's warning, coupled with Murdoch's journal, painted a disturbing picture. As I closed the door, my gaze fell on the glass I'd left empty by the sink earlier, the one I'd poured the sunset water out of. It wasn't empty anymore. A thin film of dark, viscous, almost oily residue coated the bottom, as if the glass had refilled itself with that foul night water, and then the liquid had evaporated, leaving only its sinister sediment behind. Sleep was a distant, unattainable shore. Every creak of the old motel, every sigh of the desert wind sounded amplified, sinister. The old radio in the lobby, its static-laced tunes barely audible, seemed to be playing on a loop, the same mournful country song about lost love and a river that swallowed souls. I reread Ray Murdoch's frantic journal entries, each word a fresh drop of ice water down my spine. The knocking, room 6, faces in the plumbing, my own past, the ghosts of the accident, the faces of my wife and daughter, swam in the periphery of my vision, their remembered sorrows mingling with the palpable dread of Dry Hollow. I was used to sleepless nights, but this was different. This wasn't just my own internal torment. The motel itself felt like a living entity, watching, waiting, its silence teeming with an unspoken ancient malevolence. The cheap digital clock on the nightstand, its numbers a garish red, ticked over with agonizing slowness. 2:58 a.m., 2:59 a.m. I found myself holding my breath, an irrational anticipation tightening my chest. Then, precisely as the clock flipped to 3:0 a.m., it began. Knock, knock, knock. 3 distinct, deliberate raps on my door. Not loud, not aggressive, but firm, resonant, as if made with a heavy, cold knuckle. My heart leaped into my throat. I froze, every nerve ending screaming. Rule 2. If you hear knocking at 3 a.m., count the knocks. If it's more than 3, don't answer. Silence descended again, thick and absolute, for what felt like an eternity. I counted the seconds, my breath shallow. Then, just as a sliver of relief began to uncoil within me, it came again. Knock. A single, final rap. Louder this time. More insistent. Definitive. 4 knocks. Don't answer. Don't answer! My body was rigid, every muscle tensed. My gaze was fixed on the door, half expecting the flimsy wood to splinter inwards, but nothing happened. Only the oppressive silence returned, now charged with a terrifying, unspoken question. Then, from the direction of room 2, the room of the loudmouth trucker who dismissed Lorna's rules, I heard a muffled sound, a scraping, like a chair being dragged across a wooden floor. Then his gruff, irritated voice. All right, I'm coming. Keep your damn shirt on. I heard the distinct click of room 2's door latch, then the creak of its hinges, a brief, surprised, almost questioning grunt from the trucker. Then, a strange, wet, dragging sound, like something heavy and sodden being pulled across the concrete walkway. It was followed by an abrupt, sickeningly final thump. And then, silence. A silence so profound, so absolute, It was more terrifying than any scream. I scrambled off the bed, my legs shaking, and crept to the window, pulling the edge of the thin, grimy curtain aside just enough to peer out. The walkway outside room 2 was empty in the pale moonlight, but Lorna was there. She stood motionless in the open doorway of the motel office, a slim, dark silhouette against the dim interior light. She was looking directly at room 2, her head tilted slightly, not with surprise or alarm, but with that same unnerving, almost ritualistic attentiveness I'd seen earlier, as if she were observing a well-rehearsed play, its tragic conclusion foreknown and accepted. She remained there for a long minute, a statue carved from desert stillness, before slowly, deliberately, retreating back into the shadows of the office. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Every shadow in my room seemed to writhe with unseen presences. Every creak of the building was the sound of something dragging itself closer. When the first pale light of dawn finally seeped through the grimy window, I felt an almost desperate relief. I had to get out of Dry Hollow. As soon as it was light enough, I threw on my clothes and practically ran to my truck. The tire was still flat, utterly, hopelessly flat, and the specific lug nuts, I now realized with the surge of cold dread, were specialized type I didn't have a wrench for in my standard kit. Room 2's door was closed. The curtains were drawn. The burly trucker's rig, which had been parked 2 spots down from mine, was gone. Vanished as completely as if it had never been there. When I cautiously approached the office, Lorna was behind the counter, calmly polishing a glass with a clean cloth, the static-laced radio playing its mournful tune. "Morning, Mr. Monroe," she said, her voice the same soft, unwavering melody. "Sleep well?" "The guy in room 2. I began, my voice hoarse. "Did you see him leave?" She paused in her polishing, her gaze meeting mine, calm and direct. "He checked out very early, Mr. Monroe. Said he had a long drive ahead." She didn't blink. And there wasn't a flicker of deception in her eyes, only that profound, ageless stillness. As I turned to leave, defeated for the moment, my gaze fell upon the concrete walkway just outside my own door. Room 5. There, almost invisible against the pale gray, was a small damp patch of dark, reddish-brown sand, the kind you find deep under riverbeds. It was arranged in a crude, unsettling spiral pattern, as if something had been patiently waiting there in the dark hours after the knocking, leaving behind a tiny, telltale calling card. The second day in Dry Hollow stretched before me like a prison sentence. My attempts to flag down passing traffic on the distant highway, what little there was, proved futile. The motel, set back as it was, and partially obscured by a low rise, was practically invisible from the main road. My phone remained a useless brick. Lorna offered no assistance with the flat tire, merely stating with her infuriating calm that the nearest garage was in a town 50 miles away, and she had no way of contacting them. I was trapped. Driven by a gnawing desperation, I decided to explore the town of Dry Hollow itself. Beyond the immediate perimeter of the motel, it was a ghost town in the truest sense. Buildings sacked, their windows like vacant eyes, their doorways gaping maws choked with dust and tumbleweeds. A thick layer of fine reddish dust coated everything, undisturbed by human passage for what looked like decades. I found a general store, its shelves long since looted or rotted, but a stack of old newspapers lay yellowed and brittle in a corner. The Dry Hollow Chronicle. The headlines, dated sporadically through early 1983, spoke of strange seismic tremors, unexplained ground subsidences, and a growing number of inexplicable disappearances. The final edition, dated March 1983, had a banner headline: "Officials order Dry Hollow evacuated. Town declared uninhabitable." There was no specific reason given, just vague references to geological instability. The sun beat down mercilessly. The silence was absolute, broken only by the skittering of lizards and the mournful sigh of the wind through the decaying structures. It felt as if the entire town had simply held its breath one day and never exhaled. As dusk began to settle on my second, unwilling day, casting long, distorted shadows across the desolate landscape, the coyotes began to howl. I'd heard coyotes before, plenty of times, their yips and yaps a familiar soundtrack to many a desert night. But this was different, utterly different. It started with a single high, mournful cry from the distant mesas. Then another joined it, then another and another, until the air was filled with a chorus of voices, a multitude of coyotes, all howling in perfect, unearthly harmony. It wasn't the scattered, chaotic sound of a wild pack. It was a structured, almost melodic dirge, a mournful, layered chant that seemed to vibrate in my bones, resonating with a primal, unsettling frequency. Rule 3. When you hear coyotes howling in perfect harmony, stay inside until the singing stops. The sound was both beautiful and terrifying, ancient and deeply wrong. I scrambled back to the dubious canyon of room 5, my heart pounding. Just as I reached the motel's U-shaped courtyard, I saw him again, Dr. Asher Vale, the spectral geologist. He looked more agitated this time, his form flickering more violently at the edges, as if the coyote chorus was somehow disrupting his already tenuous manifestation. He stood near the edge of the motel property, where the cracked asphalt gave way to the open desert, gesturing frantically towards me. "The song, Monroe," he gasped, his voice thin and reedy, almost lost in the overwhelming sound of the coyotes. "It's the resonance, the echo of the displaced, the ones the earth remembered and reclaimed." His eyes were wide with a desperate urgency. "Don't go out there. Not while they sing in unison. The harmony. It unweaves you. It calls you back to the dust. You'll become part of the sand, part of the echo." His voice faded, and his form shimmered violently, almost dissolving into the heat haze rising from the cooling desert floor, before snapping back into a semblance of solidity. I slammed the door of room 5 behind me, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The coyote chorus swelled, filling the room, pressing in from all sides, and with it an unnatural, stifling heat began to radiate from the walls. Despite the rapidly cooling desert night outside, the air grew thick, cloying, smelling strongly of ozone and that strange burnt jasmine scent I'd noticed earlier. The cheap, faded patterns on the wallpaper, repeating anemic desert flowers, seemed to writhe and shift in my peripheral vision, their dull colors momentarily flaring with an inner, sickly luminescence. A desperate, irrational urge to flee, to burst out of the oppressive heat of the room and into the open desert, clawed at me. But Vale's terrified warning, and the cold certainty of the third rule, held me a prisoner. The heat intensified. Sweat trickled down my temples. The very silence between the harmonious howls felt charged, malevolent. I risked a glance out the grimy window. The desert beyond was bathed in the eerie twilight, the chorus of howls seeming to make the very air shimmer. And then I saw it. A figure, standing far out in the desert, a slender silhouette against the dying light, perfectly still, looking directly towards the motel. It was too distant to make out any features, but its posture, its unnerving stillness. It was Lorna. As the coyote song reached a deafening, soul-shaking crescendo, the ground outside my window, the very sand and dust of Dry Hollow, seemed to ripple, to flow like dark water for a horrifying instant. The distant figure of Lorna momentarily dissolved into that rippling heat haze, becoming one with the shimmering air, before slowly, impossibly, reforming as the harmonious howls began to slowly, reluctantly, fade one voice at a time, until only the time, normal. Scattered yips of individual coyotes and the vast, indifferent silence of the desert night remained. The oppressive heat in my room began to recede, leaving me clammy, trembling, and more certain than ever that Dry Hollow was not just a place, but a patient, hungry trap. The coyote chorus faded into the vast, indifferent silence of the desert, leaving behind an echo of disquiet that thrummed in my bones. The oppressive heat in room 5 slowly receded, but the chill that replaced it was no comfort. It was the coldness of dawning, horrifying certainty. I was not merely stranded in a strange motel. I was caught in something ancient and predatory, a place that operated by its own set of malevolent, unbreakable laws. Sleep was an impossibility. Every creak of the settling building, every rustle of wind through the skeletal branches of the lone mesquite tree outside my window sounded like a footfall, a whisper, a prelude. I couldn't just wait for the next rule to manifest, for the next 3 a.m. knock, or another chorus of unholy song. The memory of the trucker in room 2, the empty space where his rig had been, Lorna's unnervingly placid demeanor. It all coalesced into a single, chilling realization. Lorna wasn't just a witness to these horrors. She was a part of them, perhaps even an orchestrator. As the first faint tendrils of dawn stained the eastern sky, I left my room, my mind a cold knot of resolve. I had to confront her. I had to know. Lorna was where she always seemed to be, behind the counter in the dim, dusty lobby, the ever-present radio murmuring its ghostly tunes. She looked up as I entered, her pale eyes calm, unreadable. There was no surprise on her face, only that familiar, disconcerting stillness. "Mr. Monroe," she said, her voice the usual soft, melodic whisper. "You're up early. I trust the night was uneventful after the coyotes settled?" Uneventful? My voice was rough, accusatory. "Lady, people are disappearing. That trucker from room 2, where is he? And what the hell is this place? These rules." I slammed Ray Murdoch's water-stained journal onto the counter between us. This man, Murdoch, he knew. He wrote about it. The knocking, the water, room 6. For the first time, a flicker of something disturbed Lorna's ageless calm. Her gaze dropped to the journal, then back to me, a shadow passing through the depths of her eyes. "Some stories are best left undisturbed, Mr. Monroe. Some doors are best left unopened. I'm not leaving until I get some answers," I stated, my voice harder than I intended. "What is room 6? And what are you in all of this?" Lorna was silent for a long moment, her gaze drifting towards the heavily bricked-up doorway of room 6, visible down the short, dim corridor that led from the lobby to the guest rooms. When she finally spoke, her voice was even softer, imbued with a profound, ancient weariness. "Dry Hollow is a place of balance, Mr. Monroe. It has always been. It requires certain offerings, certain resonances." She turned her gaze back to me, and in her eyes, I saw not malice, but a sorrow so deep, it was almost terrifying. "I am the keeper of that balance, the tender of its needs." "Needs?" I scoffed. "What kind of needs involve people vanishing into thin air?" "They don't vanish, Mr. Monroe," she corrected gently. "They are invited, chosen, the rules. They are a filter, a way for Dry Hollow to find those who resonate with its particular frequency." She paused, her gaze almost pitying. "The one beneath the sand, as some of the old ones called it. It's not a demon, not in the way your stories might imagine. It is the land itself, ancient, aware, tied to the deep water, to the memories buried in the dust. And it seeks completion. It seeks to mend the fractures in those who come here." Her words were insane, yet spoken with such quiet conviction they bypassed my disbelief and landed like shards of ice in my gut. "Fractures? We all have them, Mr. Monroe," Lorna said, her eyes seeming to look right through me, to see the raw, unhealed wound of my past, the accident, my lost family, unresolved sorrows, regrets that echo, resolved sorrows, the one beneath. It offers a way to make those echoes whole again, to see what might have been, to find peace. Her voice was a siren song, dangerously seductive. Your own wound, Mr. Monroe. It sings so loudly in this place. The implication was horrifying. She hadn't just been observing. She'd been assessing me, the trucker, anyone unfortunate enough to stumble into Dry Hollow. And you, Lorna. I pressed. What's your fracture? Why are you here? A genuine heartbreaking sadness touched her features. I was chosen long ago, when Dry Hollow first awakened in its current form, 1983. I was the only one left when the earth shifted. I was meant to be its first offering of that new cycle, but I made a bargain to be its keeper instead, to find others, to find the right others. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. If I find someone whose resonance is perfect, someone who can truly complete its song, perhaps then my vigil can end. Perhaps then I can leave Dry Hollow's dust behind. Room 6, she explained, was the heart of it. The place where the veil between worlds, or between realities, was thinnest. The focal point of the one beneath's power. It hadn't been bricked up to keep something in. It had been bricked up to try and contain the motel's consuming essence. Driven by a desperate, reckless urgency, I knew I had to see it. Murdoch's journal had mentioned a loose brick, a forgotten access point used in his terror-filled final days, trying to understand what was happening. While Lorna watched, her face a mask of weary resignation, I found it, a single brick, low down near the floor, that came away with a grating scrape of old mortar. Behind it was darkness, and a smell, an overwhelming, cloying miasma of stagnant water, desert blooms crushed underfoot, and something else, something indescribably ancient and expectant. Lorna didn't try to stop me as I pulled away more bricks, creating a ragged opening. It will show you what you most desire, Mr. Monroe, she whispered, her voice laced with a terrible pity. And in that desire, it will claim you. I squeezed through the opening into room 6. It wasn't a room so much as a cavity, a raw wound in the fabric of reality. The air was frigid, despite the cloying sweetness of the smell. The walls, or what passed for them, seemed to weep a dark, viscous liquid that wasn't water. The floor felt soft, yielding, like packed, damp sand that shifted under my weight. There was no furniture, only in the very center of the space, a cracked, ancient porcelain sink, its surface stained with what looked like centuries of rust and grime. From its tarnished faucet, a single, thick drop of black water welled up, hung suspended for a moment, then flowed upwards for a few inches before cascading back down into the basin with a soft, sighing splash. Again and again, defying gravity, deafing sanity. And then they were there. My wife, Sarah, my daughter, Lily, not as ghosts, not as memories, but as they should have been. Sarah, her smile radiant, her eyes full of the love I'd shattered. Lily, a few years older than when I'd last seen her, her laughter echoing in the impossible space, holding out a hand towards me. "Daddy," she said, her voice clear and real. "We missed you. We've been waiting. Come home, Daddy." This wasn't a trick of the light. This felt devastatingly real. The peace Lorna had spoken of, the mending of the fracture. It was an unbearable, irresistible temptation. The one beneath wasn't a monster of claws and teeth. One beneath wasn't a monster of claws and teeth. It was a far more insidious horror. a weaver of lost hopes, a purveyor of perfect, impossible second chances. Lorna had followed me in, or perhaps she had always been a part of this space. She stood near the periphery, her form indistinct in the room's strange, internal gloom. "Accept it, Carter," she urged, her voice a gentle caress. "Let it heal you. Let it make you whole. And in doing so, you will set me free." The illusions of my family stepped closer, their hands outstretched. The upward flowing water in the sink pulsed, releasing a wave of that sweet, cloying scent, now mixed with the subtle, unmistakable aroma of Sarah's favorite jasmine perfume. The temperature in the room plummeted further. The knocking, the terrible 3 a.m. knocking, began to echo from all around us. Not just 4 raps, but a chaotic, uncountable cacophony. The prime numbers Lorna hadn't mentioned, but that Murdoch had hinted at in his ravings. And through it all, faint at first, then swelling, came the sound of coyotes, their voices rising in that perfect, unearthly, harmonious howl, not from the desert outside, but from within the very walls of room 6 itself, a chorus of sorrow and need. Welcome. The one beneath the sand was ready to claim its offering. The illusions of Sarah and Lily were agonizingly perfect. Every detail, from the way Sarah tilted her head when she smiled to the tiny star-shaped birthmark just visible on Lily's wrist. A detail I hadn't consciously remembered in years, was rendered with a devastating, heartbreaking accuracy. The peace they offered, the absolution for a guilt that had gnawed at my soul for so long, was a siren song threatening to drown me. My hand reached out, almost of its own volition, towards Lily's outstretched fingers. "This isn't real," I rasped, the words a desperate incantation against the overwhelming tide of desire. My voice sounded distant, thin, in the oppressive, supernaturally charged air of room 6. "But it can be, Daddy," Lily's illusion whispered, her eyes wide and pleading, reflecting a perfect, innocent longing that mirrored my own. "We can be a family again. No more trucks. No more lonely nights. Just us." The scent of jasmine intensified, a suffocating sweetness. The coyote chorus swelled, their unearthly harmony seeming to vibrate through my very bones, shaking my resolve. The cacophony of prime-numbered knocks battered at my sanity. Lorna's voice, soft and insidious, echoed from the periphery. "Let go, Carter. It's so much easier to let go. Find your peace. Give me mine." But as my fingers brushed the cool, impossibly solid feeling illusion of Lily's hand, a jolt, not of comfort, but of profound alien wrongness, shot up my arm. This wasn't Lily. This wasn't Sarah. This was a construct, a meticulously crafted echo designed to ensnare. My real daughter's hand had been warm, slightly sticky from whatever game she'd been playing. This was cold, smooth, perfect, too perfect. The memory of the accident, the actual, horrifying, visceral reality of it, the screech of tires, the shattering glass, the awful silence afterwards, slammed back into my consciousness, a brutal counterpoint to this seductive false peace. That pain, that raw, unvarnished grief was mine. It was real. This was a lie. "No," I choked out, snatching my hand back as if burned. This isn't how it happened." The illusions flickered, their perfect smiles faltering for a microsecond. A hint of something cold and calculating in their eyes before the mask of loving sorrow snapped back into place. "Don't fight it, Carter," Sarah's likeness murmured, her voice now holding a subtle, disquieting edge of impatience. Lorna stepped forward from the shadows, her spectral calm finally breaking, replaced by a desperate, almost feral intensity. "He's resisting. Why is he resisting? He's perfect. His wound is so deep." She looked not at me, but at the walls, at the upward flowing sink, as if addressing the room itself, the one beneath. He must accept, as if in response to her agitation. The manifestations in room 6 intensified. The illusions of my family became more insistent, their pleas more desperate, their touches now feeling like icy clamps. The walls seemed to weep the dark, oily water more profusely. The image of Ray Murdoch, his face bloated and waterlogged, his eyes wide with eternal terror, materialized from the pulsing sink, clawing its way out, his spectral hands reaching for me. "It lies," he gurgled, black water spilling from his phantom mouth. "It shows you heaven to drag you to its hell." Dr. Asharvala's flickering form appeared in a corner, his body seeming to crumble into trails of fine reddish sand even as he tried to speak. The water. Its memory. It rewrites. His voice dissolved into a whisper of static and blowing sand. Lorna, her face contorted in a mask of frustration and dawning fear, lunged at me, trying to physically push me deeper into the room, towards the epicenter of the sink. "You have to stay. You have to complete the cycle. It's the only way." In the desperate struggle, my hand, flailing, knocked against the sink, a glass I hadn't noticed before, sitting on its edge, filled with that dark, glistening night water from the upward flowing faucet, teetered and fell, not onto the floor, but into the illusion of Lily. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. Where the water touched her, Lily's form dissolved, not like a ghost fading, but like a sugar sculpture melting in acid, her perfect features contorting into a silent scream as she unraveled into shimmering, dark particles that were instantly absorbed by the pulsating floor. "No!" Sarah's illusion shrieked, her beautiful face twisting into a mask of inhuman rage as she lunged for me, her fingers elongating into needle-sharp talons. "The rules: don't drink the tap water after sunset. It comes from a different source at night. It wasn't just for drinking. This water, the entity's essence, was inimical to its own constructs. When directly applied, perhaps because it was too concentrated, too raw." I staggered back, my mind reeling. Lorna stared, aghast at the dissolving remnants of the Lily illusion. "What have you done?" she whispered, her voice filled with a new, chilling dread. You've broken the offering." The room itself seemed to recoil. The harmonious coyote howls fractured into a cacophony of panicked, discordant yelps. The prime-numbered knocks became a frantic, irregular hammering. The upward flow of water in the sink sputtered, then gushed violently, black and thick as crude oil. The illusion of Sarah, mid-lunge, began to unravel, her form flickering and distorting, her screams turning into electronic shrieks. The one beneath the sand was not pleased. Its carefully constructed trap, its seductive illusion, had been defiled, and its anger was turning on its keeper. The oily tendrils I'd seen on the 12th floor, or something horrifyingly similar, erupted from the sandy floor of room 6, not reaching for me, but for Lorna. She screamed, a raw, terrified sound, as they snaked around her ankles, her wrists, pulling her down. The ageless calm in her eyes was replaced by a primal terror I recognized from my own nightmares. "It was supposed to be you," she shrieked at me, her voice cracking as the shadows began to consume her. "Not me. I served it. I brought it what it needed." The room was tearing itself apart. The walls cracked, sand and dust pouring in. The bricked-up doorway groaned, the mortar exploding outwards. The very structure of the dry, hollow motel was groaning in its death throes. I had to get out. I scrambled back through the crumbling opening of room 6, Lorna's final, despairing screams, swallowed by the roar of collapsing timbers and the unearthly shriek of the one beneath. As its sanctum was violated, the dry, hollow motel was literally coming apart at the seams. The corridor ceiling buckled, dust and debris raining down. The sickly neon sign outside exploded in a shower of sparks and shattered glass. I didn't stop to think, just ran, fueled by adrenaline and a terror that went bone deep. Out of the lobby, past the overturned counter and the now silent radio, and into the pre-dawn gloom. The earth itself seemed to be trembling, the air thick with choking dust and the overwhelming stench of ozone, burnt jasmine, and stagnant, ancient water. Behind me, with a final earth-shattering groan, the main structure of the dry, hollow motel collapsed inwards, a vortex of dust and splintered wood, as if the desert itself were reclaiming its corrupted heart. A geyser of black, oily water erupted briefly from where Room 6 had been, then subsided, leaving only a dark, steaming stain on the disturbed sand. Then, silence. A profound, ringing silence that seemed to absorb all other sound. Even the distant, gathering storm seemed to pause. I stumbled towards my truck, my legs weak, my lungs burning. The flat tire was still there, but in the bed of the truck, almost invisible under a layer of fresh desert dust, was a single, rust-free lug wrench that fit my specialized nuts perfectly. Had it been there all along, and I'd missed it in my exhaustion, or had some final, inexplicable act of the dissolving motel, or perhaps the fading echo of a grateful Ray Murdoch or Asher Vale provided it, I didn't question it. By the time the sun crested the horizon, painting the desolate landscape in hues of pale gold and rose, I was miles away from Dry Hollow, my rig eating up the miles on the freshly paved. I didn't look back. In my rearview mirror, there was no sign of the motel, no plume of dust, nothing but the flat, indifferent expanse of the New Mexico desert. It was as if the Dry Hollow Motel, and all its attendant horrors, had never existed, swallowed whole by the sand and the silence. The official story, I learned later from a brief news report about a localized, unexplained seismic event near a long-abandoned mining claim, was that an old, unstable sinkhole had collapsed. No mention of disappearances, no mention of a $30 motel. Dry Hollow remained a ghost town, its secrets buried even deeper. I still drive the long hauls, but sleep is even more elusive now. I carry the weight of Dry Hollow with me, a cold knot of memory that never quite thaws. I avoid cheap roadside motels, especially those on the edge of nowhere. I purify all my water, no matter where it comes from. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind is just right, rustling through the canvas cover of my trailer, I think I can hear it. A faint, almost inaudible chorus of coyotes, their voices rising in a perfect mournful harmony that no natural creature could ever produce. And on nights when a storm brews, when the barometric pressure drops, I find myself counting the creaks of my truck's cab, the drips from a leaky faucet in a rest stop bathroom, the distant sounds of the highway, just to make sure there are never more than 3. A few weeks ago, I was in a diner in Arizona, 1,000 miles from Dry Hollow. I ordered a glass of water. As the waitress set it down, the lights flickered, just once. I looked at the water for a horrifying, almost imperceptible instant, before gravity reasserted itself with a tiny internal splash. The surface of the water in my glass seemed to convex, to bulge upwards. I left $30 on the counter and walked out. Some sources I now knew were never truly left behind, and the one beneath the sand, it had a very long memory and a thirst that the desert could never quite quench. Ray Murdoch's journal, which I'd salvaged from the collapsing motel, sometimes felt warm to the touch. And last night, I could have sworn a new sentence, faint and spidery, had appeared on its final blank page. It still remembers your taste, Carter. It waits.